what Manu Gonzalez does this weekend. Manu Gonzalez really has to win this Grand Prix. He does, that's what Diego Moreira needs to do. If Manu Gonzalez doesn't achieve that, then Moreira doesn't even need to top 14. He can come in and park it. But perhaps one or two butterflies in the stomach of the Brazilian, who generally is a picture of calm whenever we see him on or off the bike. It's Lewis Sotheby and Neil Morrison with you for the final Friday of the season in Moto2. And whilst it's perhaps not the close, tense, winner-take-all shootout that we all, I guess, hoped for, if you look at the point situation now on your screens, this is a Moto2 season which just deserved a final round decider, and that's what we've got.
Yeah, it absolutely is, Lewis. Good morning to you, good morning to everyone watching around the world. As you said, fantastic to be back here in Valencia after the tragic events last year. And back at the venue, which always carries the noise and carries the atmosphere. We're expecting no different this weekend. Shall I? Here on Sunday. Confirmation that Yuya Sasaki caused the crash in the last race and will be serving a long lap penalty on Sunday.
Marcos Ramirez took out on the Sunday afternoon down at turn 5. So the crazy boy, unfortunately been a naughty boy in the last 7 days. We'll see him go through the long lap penalty loop for the circuit, which he won out of course the last time he raced here 2 years ago in Moto3.
A couple of weeks on from losing the title in that particular year. He went out on a winning note, which was certainly well deserved. One rider that won't be going out on a championship winning note this year is Aaron Canet. His slim chances were extinguished in Portimao despite a really strong ride. Actually, Canet came through the 4th after a bit of a ropey start, but unfortunately it was too little too late. And nothing really for that front 3 in the race in the closing laps when he eventually caught up with them. Manu Gonzalez, well, not a terrible ride, was it, in Portimao, but really he needed to do something quite exceptional, and unfortunately we didn't see that. As you mentioned at the top of the show, his championship hopes does not really hang by a thread. 24 points in arrears from Manu Gas. You could say, Lewis, that fortune wasn't on his side in Portugal. He obviously caught a yellow flag at a really unfortunate moment at the end of qualifying, which in some ways limited him to 8th on the grid. But at the same token, we just didn't really see enough of him in the race. You could tell he wasn't quite comfortable on the bike. He had that big moment coming out of turn 5 early on when he was on the back of the top 5 riders, lost touch with them, and then the complexion of his race really changed. At no point really in the second half did you think that Manu was going to be able to catch the front 4 riders.
Yeah, it does beg the question, had Manu Gonzalez qualified on the front row, would he have been able to challenge Diego Moreira for victory anyway, given the pace we ultimately saw in the race? 3 riders dropped out of mathematical championship contention in Portimao. Here's one of them, Jake Dixon, who dropped out of the Grand Prix on the very last lap, which really has dealt a hammer blow to his hopes of finishing in the top 3 in the World Championship this season. On course to score 9 or 10 points, something like that, at the end of the race, depending on how the final lap had played out, which would have put him right in that battle with Baltus and Canet. He is still mathematically in the hunt for 3rd in the World Championship. He trails Barry Baltus now by 17 points and Aaron Canet by 11. And so he really win this Grand Prix and hope for some serious frantic problems this weekend. And of course, he clinched the team championship last time out in Portimao.
Yes, he did indeed, with Canet 4th position and Barry Baltus 5th. Come on, a bit to the Belgian in 2nd, but Dixon was comfortably the top box and score rider, and quite philosophical afterwards. He wasn't even really that upset when he crashed out in the final lap, because he felt that he had been riding above and beyond during that race, and you just have to look at the performance of the other box and scores to agree with him, really. Salas was one of those. Had a big moment on the first lap of the race. It ran off up in turn 10 when he rejoined in 20th. He had decent rhythm, but really going to be anything that could challenge the top 6 or 7 riders. We saw Celestino Vietti up at the front as well in the early laps, and he did really badly towards the end, down to 13th position. And he had 1 or 2 comments that Boston School really do need to up their game over the off-season to try and live with the Calax Challenge in 2026. They're entirely justified. That's what performance in the last couple of races to really understand that yeah, they've been well short. They've been fun watching in this final part of the year.
Yes, with, as you mentioned, with Dixon's crash, just one boxer in the top 10 in the end. That was 10th place for Van Guevara. Is this farewell to Moto2 this weekend for Albert Arena? That's confirmation on screen, yes you are. Like a new path in his career. It's confirmed to you now that path is with the AS Racing Squad in the World Supersport Championship next season. He'll be on a Yamaha R9 for 2026. Made to another world champion of the Supersport 300, the Indonesian Aldi Mahendra. For those of you who enjoy your Superbike and Supersport action, we'll still see plenty of Albert Arena next season. This is his 98th and final Moto2 start and his 172nd and final Grand Prix appearance, certainly for now at.
He'll be hoping to go out with the bang in the season overall. Albert Arena got the sides there of Javi Zero-Tuta, who continues to deputise for the injured Joe Roberts. Back home in California, resting up after it was confirmed that he had a left wrist fracture and a really painful crash in Sepang, which forced him out of the final two races of this season. The third time in the last 5 seasons that Joe has been able to actually finish a season due to injuries. Back in 21, broke his collarbone. Zano last year he broke his right wrist in Phillip Island. Here it's the left wrist, so he's not had a great deal of luck with injuries over the past 5 years. As we mentioned, just outside there, Selesai bad run but he was going to put that to an end in Portimao, but still chasing his first top 10 finish since that victory and the Zano lose.
Scored just 8 points in the 5 Grand Prix since then. So yeah, the Celestino drop off in the last stage of the season has been pretty stark. We were talking about him potentially finishing up in the top 6 in the World Championship when he won in Misano. Currently 8th in the points, could potentially drop as low as 10th this weekend if Albert Arenas and Senaregia score enough points to overhaul him. And here's Barry Baltus, who leads the chase for 3rd place in the World Championship and a place at the MotoGP Awards on Sunday night. Baltus currently 6 points ahead of his teammate Aaron Canet, and as mentioned 17 ahead of Jake Dixon, which means from Baltus' point of view to finish 3rd in the World Championship, a top 2 finish on Sunday will be enough.
And you would have to say it would be deserved as well. Baltus has been mentioned this so often this year. Revelation of being a Moto2 in 2025, being super consistent, and that 5th place in Portimao, which is top 6 of the year. Prior to this year, he'd only have 2 in 5 seasons, so that gives you an idea of the kind of step up, not just in terms of consistency, but performance on Barry Baltus in 2025. And this point total for the second half of the season, he does figure somewhere towards the top as well, so Baltus in line for 3rd overall. He'll face stiff competition from this rider though, you feel. Not only his home track, but the track he goes very, very well at. Think back to the last time we came here, Lewis, Never is really the only rider that could live with Fermin Aldeguer, who won quite convincingly in the end, but certainly made him work for the majority of that race, and that was probably Fermin's most impressive run in his entire career. That kind of final 4 races of 2023 when he was dominating, and yeah, no one can really get close to him on the next stage on that final race, so I'm starting to think that maybe this weekend could actually be a decent farewell and finale for him and the match.
The pole position, of course, that weekend as well did Aaron Canet. He is a Valencia boy. There are a few of them in this Moto2 class. Jorge Navarro is another. The yellow flags come out, and that's the reason Van Guevara on his outlap has gone down, coming through turn 6. He's already caught out a rider or 2 in Moto3 earlier on today. Danish went down there right at the beginning of Moto3 SP1, and Van Guevara has done the very same.
There you go, just slides out from under the former Moto3 champ, and a little look of exasperation as he runs toward his bike. Not a great deal of damage there, but far from the ideal start for Trans weekend here in Valencia. Yellow flags are out in Sesi 2 as the marshal's clear. Damage from that little crash, but still he should be good to go.
Much more course, as mentioned, as a result of Jake Dixon's crash at the top box Seguro finish here in the Portuguese Grand Prix. A top 10 finish for Guevara from 18th on the grid, which represents a decent recovery given how poor his qualifying was. It's worth spelling out to you some of the changes that we have this weekend. Or there's one key change which we'll come to in a second. It's largely an unchanged rider lineup because the replacement riders that we saw in Portimao are still here. We've already seen one of them, Chevy de la Souza into Joe Roberts. We also have Sergio Garcia once more in for the injured Darren Binder, of course, will take his place full-time for next season. And, sadly, the injury that Denis Onchu suffered in the summer was the last we saw of him competitively this season. Just on 17 up behind David Alonso here on screen of Danny Munoz. He is in for Onchu once again this weekend before Munoz moves across to the Italtrans team to replace, potentially, the outgoing world champion, Diogo Moreira, next season. And we do have one wild card this weekend. Red flag has just come out, by the way, in this session, as Adrian Huertas has now gone down, the other Italtrans rider. And he's high-sided, stuck down there with, that looks like Sesi, isn't it? The RW6, so they've come together. That's again in turn 6, so 3 riders down there in the shape of a couple of minutes. And with riders being treated inside the racetrack, the race direction taking the sensible decision to call an early halt to FP1.
Huertas was looking in great shape there at the side of the track. Let's hope that the Spanish rider is okay. Like an ugly one, maybe a collision going into the turn with Hiro Sasaki still in the race direction. We're on the ball. Certainly no point in risking things when a rider is lying at the side of the track just like that.
Especially when one's already gone down there minutes earlier.
Exactly. Getting stretchered away by the trackside marshals. It's good to see Ayumu picked up on his feet at least. But Huertas looking a bit worse for wear there, unfortunately.
When the Italtrans team wanted a smooth, trouble-free, incident-free, stress-free weekend, they've already had some concern in this pre-practice 1 session with Diogo Moreira's teammate Adrian Huertas already looking in a great deal of pain. Manny Gonzalez is already having some pretty forthright discussions with his team on his return to the impact box. And just to reiterate, just as we were in the process of saying, just before the red flag came out, we do have a wild card here this weekend. 22 Hector Garzo, the former Moto3 world champion, who is making his debut this weekend on an MTS. Lost audio, just a crucial moment there to understand what Aaron Kinnett was saying there to officials down in pit lane. So clearly with the rather exasperating comments of Manny Gonzalez on his return, clearly Moto2 riders have identified something that needs some attention out there on circuit.
That was looking pretty animated, as was Manny Gonzalez. We're not sure exactly why. It has something to do with the circuit, but also that is just speculation on our part. Pick up what Manu is saying there to his crew, but the car is going out to inspect things up at turn 6 just to see how things are. Keep our fingers crossed that Adrian Huertas is relatively okay, even though he's being stretched away there.
Sort of shake of the head there from Jake Dixon, certainly not shaking his head at Aaron Kinnett, shaking his head but I think in agreement that what they're clearly both rather unhappy with at the moment out there on the circuit. No information at the moment in terms of what in particular they're unhappy with. It doesn't appear to us as if there was any delay in the red flag coming out. It was thrown out before we got any signs of any yellows or any signs of any sort of crash out there on circuit. Moreira asking a question of Rocky Rubio there out of picture. And the safety car now pulls over at turn 6. I guess I want to identify, given that the 3 riders down at turn 6, of course we don't know, we haven't seen the replays yet of the crash involving Sasaki and Huertas to know whether they had separate accidents or whether they have had a similar incident to Guevara and just crashed on their own. So that's Loris Caparossi on the right, Tommy Alfonso to the left. We'll be taking a very close look at the racetrack to see if there is any obvious visible sign of what's caused some crashes down there.
Just heard from one of the photographers called Cormac Ryan Meaden, who has been trackside. Says it was a little bit precarious in Moto3 up to turn 6. He has photographs of many riders having hit some crashes up there. So I'm not sure if a bit of diminished adhesion or something perhaps on the track which is causing a few moments for riders. Rossi, I mean Alfonso will be right on that when they're inspecting the track this time.
Spanish going on down there at Fantic involving Aaron Cadet. So it could potentially be a little bit of a delay to proceedings. They won't necessarily want to open the racetrack if they're in no sort of way of knowing if they're a bit inconclusive in terms of the cause for the crashes. Also our primary concern at the moment is to wish all the very best to Adrian Huerta. And we saw back up on his feet as a result of that crash. Take a look at Ivan Ontola, who's one of the few riders remaining in this Moto2 class without a podium. So we have already been spoiled the season with Colin Vaillan's podium finish last time out in Portimao. We are now up to 17 riders who finished on a podium this season. Difficult to identify where any additional podium finishes could come from. Perhaps Ivan Ontola, given his relative experience around here. And a podium finish last time around here in Moto3 could potentially be one of the contenders to achieve that. Track gets slippery then for Jake Dixon. There's maybe 3.5 minutes into this Moto2 FP1. No rider set a lap time at the start of the session before the halt of things. But it's now the sound of reggaeton that's filling the airwaves here at the Ricardo Tormo circuit rather than some Triumph-powered Moto2 machines as Tommy Alfonso has a close inspection of the apex of turn 6.
There might be one or two damp patches still remaining to ride. Turn 6, judging by Marshall carrying the leaf blower over there, which they can use to dry the track surface as well. There is human. It's actually good to see him back. The IW is probably a race in the box. Gives the impression with his hand signals that the front just turned without any kind of warning. Seems to be an expert in body language to understand what happened there, but he was looking a little bit shaken up after what happened at the start of this FP1 session.
Not the rider that generally gets hot under the collar, is he? Yuki, but clearly, understandably, given what we've seen at least post-crash, very perturbed and irritated by what's happened.
Yeah, you were just saying there, Lewis is Colin Vail. He was our 17th different podium finisher. I mean, it has been a crazy year for variety in Moto2. Back in this drum for quite some time, but 10 different winners, 17 different podium finishers across the year. I mean, that is more than half the grids that have been capable on their day of competing up at the front and finishing on the podium. Father, of course, was one of those names as well, and Mignon. And really, I think we can look at the Pirelli era in Moto2, and Pirelli car has been a real reason for that. It has been something of a leveler in some respects. Last year we had 18 different podium finishers, which I think is a record for the intermediate class in one season. Not sure if you remember how many riders won last year, but it certainly was
8 or 9, was it?
8 or 9. Season? Yeah, I'm sure it's around that number as well. So quite easy race in Moto2 is where it's at currently.
Because the field is so close, we often see it in qualifying sessions, we often see it in practice sessions where half seconds, if not less than that, sometimes split the top 10 or even the top 14. Of course, it'll be crucial this afternoon when we see riders through to qualifying 2. Of course, if you can just absolutely ace it on a given weekend, you can turn yourself from regular midfielder into genuine podium contender. You can't say that some of those podium finishes of the 2017 you've had. You can't say at all those podiums were fluky podiums or fortunate podiums. They were genuinely earned through hard work and good performance over the weekend. Here's one of your record 10 winners, Celestino Vietti. Was claimed victory back on home soil at the San Marino Grand Prix. Certainly one of the poster boys for how disappointing a Bottascura season has been in 2025. So much was expected of them, having won the Riders' Championship in Igora last season. Yet they have taken overall 4 Grand Prix victories this year, 3 for Jake Dixon, plus Celestino Vietti's success in Misano. But kind of in a situation with Bottascura this season where they needed conditions to be truly in their favour for them ultimately to take the fight to Calais.
Yeah, I agree with that. After the first 3 races of the season, Jake Dixon has won 2 of them. Celestino Vietti has finished on the podium once and should have been really on the podium twice. We were thinking after Texas that both of those riders would be in the hunt for the championship. Some vague information that there is some water down at turn 6. You see there that there is a little bit of clean-up operation in process, overseen by Tommy Alfonso. Again, ultimately it's been quite a disappointing year for Bottascura efforts, and have to look at some of the names that are within their ranks and how poorly they've performed relative to the rest of the competition. The likes of Isan Guevara, who is now his 3rd season of Moto2. Tony Albolino has had a largely terrible season, I think it's fair to say, in his 5th year in this category. Riders like that are struggling so comprehensively week on week, then there is something up.
So Aaron Canet is giving some information to Sam Crowbar by the looks of that. Looking at the back of his head. Sadly, all we can hear is music over the conversations. So Sam Crowbar, the MotoGP steward nowadays, but of course able to feed back information to race direction. Of course, from Boris Caparossi and Tommy Alfonso at the scene. Informing them of what the process will be from now. So we'll feed back information from the corner at turn 6. As you can see the leaf blowers there, we're trying to dry the apex in particular of turn 6, basically the racing line. You can see that operation taking place, and only when they're satisfied and the circuit is safe to continue on will they send riders to back out once again. You saw Diogo Moreira on screen a moment ago inside the box. Did actually catch up with Diogo yesterday. Really nothing else to ask him how he's feeling about this World Championship deciders ahead of him. He said he's relatively calm at this stage. He said the nerves were really in the early part of the Portuguese Grand Prix when he was up behind, or ahead of Colin Byron and then behind him. A little uncertain and unsure of himself given what was on the line in Portimao. And isn't really thinking if this is a weekend or to finish in the top 14. Of course, the very easiest way to finish in the top 14 is to finish first and win the Grand Prix. And I think that's one thing that really has to be admired about Diogo Moreira. Is the higher the pressure has been in this Moto3 season, the better seemingly he has got pole positions now. 3 of the last 4 Grand Prix. A pole that didn't quite come from nowhere, but not far off in Portimao 6 days ago. And with Manu Gonzalez behind him, you'll be well aware that Gonzalez was behind him, even if he wasn't quite sure how far behind him in that Grand Prix. Would have been forgiven Diogo for just saying second place will do me just fine, I'll stay behind Colin Byron, who might want this victory a bit more than me in this Grand Prix. He hasn't won in Moto2 before. I'm fighting for a World Championship, but he was prepared to go for it. He was prepared to go for the big points and is rewarded with all 25 as a Moto2 race winner in Portimao. And whether you can truly put Manu Gonzalez's dips down to pressure, I think there are more factors at play than that. There is no question that when the pressure has been on, Diogo Moreira has risen rather than shrunk.
Yeah, that is a very fair comment, I would say. There was so many moments through the weekend in Portugal when it wasn't looking brilliant for Moreira. I mean, he didn't exactly boss the field on Friday. He looked considerably well off it. And then lost a decent chunk of FP2, in fact all of FP2, because it was wet and the track was dry. A lot of riders saw no sense in going on. Right in that section on Saturday morning, Portugal 1 week ago, just sat chilling on pit wall, joking with his mechanics, speaking with other riders, and an absolute picture of relaxation. We thought at the time that maybe it was something of an act that he was putting that on, but in reality he was just feeling that kind of relaxed at the advanced stage of the championship. That is a real skill to carry that kind of composure. We saw that in his riding. He delivered the pole position lap exactly when it mattered. And aside from a few nerves at the start of the race when it was clear that he wasn't riding freely up in the front, in the lead, you could see a whole group of riders bunching up behind him. Once he got into second, he was able to get his concentration back, go again. And as you said, Lewis, really did not need to overtake Qualifier. There was considerable risk at the end of that race, but he decided to go for it. And when the pressure's really been on in this second part of the season, Moreira has been the one that's risen to the challenge. And I think after a ride like Portimao, this point of the season where you're looking for performances which define a champion and define a championship, and that race in Portimao most certainly was one of those where you thought, Moreira, he deserves to be able to the championship.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed at the time when we were calling the qualifying session live, that qualifying lap that Moreira did, he overturned a quarter of a second deficit in the final sector and ended up taking pole position from James Dixon.
Yeah, we weren't that excited about the
No, we weren't paying attention to it.
Yeah, it's because we were just seeing great sectors with Diogo Moreira, and then suddenly, he, out of nowhere, jumped up into first position right at the end, and we thought, how on earth did that happen?
Yeah, he didn't actually pull out the fastest final sector of the session. That was Colin Byer, obviously on his way to qualifying himself on the front row of the grid. But he came from nowhere. He clearly was taking a level of risk and, I guess, pushing through that final sequence of right-handers to, I guess, earn that pole position. He was prepared to put it all on the line, whereas others potentially weren't. And of course, he got that lap in moments before Aaron Canet crashed in qualifying 2 and brought the yellow flags out. Just to reiterate, Manny Gonzalez wins this Valencia Grand Prix on Sunday afternoon. The Grand Prix gets underway at 12:15 local time here in Valencia on Sunday. And we're now going to see what happens. We're going to see riders coming together. Yeah, these are 2 separate crashes. That's a big high side there for Adrian Huertas. And is Saki going to then come into the picture and have his own accident because Saki's not there at the moment. I think is this the Yumu coming into picture now? We're not going to see it, but that was a clearly separate independent crashes for Adrian Huertas and for Yumu Sasaki. Saw from Guevara's that it was a front ender, but there was the rear lighting up and firing Huertas to the scene of the accident, which saw him go down. Sounds like he was in so much pain as a result of that. That's CCTV footage that Race Direction will have available to them, part to monitor any incidents on track and also track limits through the weekend. Yeah, just to remind you of what the 2 championship contenders need this weekend. Manny Gonzalez wins, Diogo Moreira needs to finish 14th or better, he's champion. Any other result for Manny Gonzalez and Moreira is champion automatically. There is only one scenario where Manny Gonzalez can be crowned champion. That is if he wins the Valencia Grand Prix and Diogo Moreira is outside the top 14. If Moreira is 15th and Gonzalez wins, they will finish this year's World Championship level on points, but by virtue of Gonzalez winning on Sunday, he would take the tiebreaker by virtue of his then 5 wins, Diogo Moreira's 4.
Yeah, on the basis of recent form, that is not looking so likely. What we've seen in this second part of the year, as Huertas' bike has been brought back into the Alpine box, then some damage to the seat unit. No word on Adrian's condition, but we'll let you know when we have an update. Well, it did look as though he was conscious on the stretcher, was moving, but understandably in some severe pain. You remember Philip Salic having a crash down there, Moto3 back in the day, and yeah, it was a similar kind of high side, which really hurt the Czech rider. I hope that Huertas will be okay to continue through the rest of this weekend.
Turn 6, the Ancolnieto corner. It's not a fast corner by any means. It's the second gear, around 80 kilometres an hour, 60 miles an hour in pure dry conditions with no hazards to be wary of. Of course, keep eyesight in that sort of manner. It can do some serious damage both to the motorcycle and to the rider. So we wish Qualitas all the best. He's all absolutely fine, but we may not see him again in the rest of this session. We now look at the rider who sits second, and a rather distant second now in the World Championship, Manu Gonzalez. For Manu Gas, the run goes on. The Czech Grand Prix pre-summer break still only outscored Diogo Moreira on one occasion. And what Diogo Moreira is actually looking to do this weekend, Manu Gonzalez won't enjoy us saying this, but Diogo Moreira does win the Moto2 World Championship this weekend, it would be the biggest comeback in terms of points in intermediate class history. He was 61 points behind after the French Grand Prix, and 60 points back after the Czech Grand Prix at the midway point of the season when we went on for our summer holidays. No one has ever won an intermediate class championship from that far back in terms of points.
Yeah, there's been an 84-point swing in Moreira's direction over the past 9 races, which is absolutely staggering. When you consider the form and the consistency of Manu Gonzalez in the first part of the season, unfortunately his form has tailed off, and it must have been so demoralising for Manu back in Portugal. He had such a brilliant pre-season test there, way back in February, where he was comfortably faster than all of the Moto2 riders and teams that were there. And I'm sure he was going into Portugal thinking, you know what, this is my chance to really get back at Diogo, and it wasn't ever really apparent, was it? He did look okay on Friday, did Manu. It wasn't as though he was head and shoulders above the rest of the riders though. Kind of there or thereabouts, but this rider here, Aaron Jeanette, Barry Baltus, but it wasn't like we saw Manu kind of dominant. And then that race on Sunday where just a bit toothless, I think we can really say, unable to affect the riders up ahead, and I feel that that race was quite symbolic really of the second part of the season. He was there or thereabouts, but not really able to impact on the top places. So it's been a shame for Manu. It's still been a very, very positive season for him on the whole. No question. Coming across from World Supersport, and in your 4th season in Moto2, fighting for the championship, I mean nearly winning the championship. I mean it's a pretty good achievement, but I do hope that the disappointment of this year won't kind of hang over going into the off-season, because losing that kind of advantage I think can really affect you mentally.
Must have been such a mental hammer blow to lose that second place in Indonesia through no fault of his own at all, qualifying through what I guess could be politely termed as a technicality, but ultimately he was riding a motorcycle that didn't conform with the regulations, didn't gain any material benefit or any lap time advantage from it. Unfortunately, he wasn't riding a legal motorcycle on the Sunday in Mandalika. Of course, had he been given that second place, had he not been disqualified, there would be just 4 points between the top two, and we would genuinely have a winner-takes-all shootout between Moreira and Gonzalez this weekend. But Diogo Moreira would still, even with that, be leading the World Championship at this point. He wouldn't take the points lead away from Manu Gonzalez in Portugal.
It's all ifs and buts and hypotheticals at this stage. I'm sure Manu would argue that had he not been disqualified in Indonesia, he wouldn't have been attacking so forcefully in Malaysia. He would have seen Diogo Moreira behind him and thought, you know what, I'll let him through and just follow him home. There'll be no big drama. But as it was, he had to go on the attack from that moment. He really could not afford Moreira to get through. And Malaysia was arguably, well, I think Indonesia and Malaysia were arguably the 2 biggest swings of the championship.
Then when you consider how far down on the grid Diogo Moreira was going into the Malaysian Grand Prix. 16th, of course, he qualified after draws to the qualifying session where he and Manu Gonzalez were scrapping like they were on a last lap battle for the World Championship on the first time laps of qualifying 2. It's interesting, isn't it, with Diogo Moreira, because no one really spoke of him as a World Championship contender coming into this season. I think we all expected podiums and potentially a win from him this season. Of course, second season in the Moto2 World Championship. Clinched the Rookie of the Year prize at the final round of last season. It was very different top with Generations Rookie of the Year last season. What was the first point this season where you really considered Moreira a genuine title threat? Because even when he won in Athens, I'm not sure at that point I genuinely believed that a title challenge was coming for the Brazilian.
Yeah, I would say that it's a fair question. I mean, you might be listening at the moment thinking we're talking absolute nonsense. It was clear from the earliest point in the season when he just missed out on the podium back in Thailand.
Austria maybe, would it be, when Manu Gonzalez DNF'd and Diogo won?
Quite possibly, yeah. But then just a couple of races after that, we were in Barcelona and he was 14. And I have to say after that, I thought, well, that's it over for Diogo. The manner in which he responded to that crushing disappointment in Barcelona really has been so impressive. And that was the only Grand Prix in the last 9 in which Diogo has been out of the top 5 previously. And we not had that instance in Saturday, which then effectively put him out of Brno. He was very injured there, served his long lap penalty and then retired. That really good run would have stretched back even further for Diogo. So essentially it has been from, since we got back to Europe, I think, Jerez, the Spanish Grand Prix, that Diogo has been constant inside the top 4, top 5 positions. And that consistency has ultimately led him to win the championship. But to answer your question, Lewis, I would say, honestly, it was probably Indonesia when I seriously thought, okay, he can win this. He can really probably win this. Up until then, I really had my doubts, I would say, because we've never seen the complete weekend from him. And we arguably still haven't.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, he's had 4 positions and then gone on to win, like we saw in Portimao, but still we haven't seen Diogo Moreira properly assert himself from a Friday morning and then carry that all the way through. To be fair, with his amount of experience in the class, that is to be expected. We are talking about a rider still in his second season. As we have confirmation that Midland will open in over 5 minutes' time. Certainly good news. It sounds as though the marshals have done their job up at turn number 6 and should have some action back on track very soon indeed. But yeah, it took me some time to become a proper Diogo believer, and I would say that after Portimao, I'm right aboard the bridge. It's only taken 21 runs.
You've always got there in the end. Think back to the start of the season as well. Moreira was sort of the plucky underdog that just refused to quit, wasn't he? In some of those battles with Selesai, on a couple of occasions actually, when they were battling for the podium in Thailand, and then again in Jerez, where it's fair to say that Diogo didn't please Senna with some of his aggression and tenacity in that particular race. But yeah, you chart Moreira's progress from Silverstone, where he took his first podium of the season when he finished in second place to make winner Selesai. Pretty short free. That was round 7 of the season, so we were already nearly a third of the way into the season when Moreira took his first podium of 2025. Of course, the Sachsenring and Brno non-scores can kind of be lumped in together because one directly led to the other. Of course, his crash from 25th on the grid to the podium battle, and then the collision with David Alonso as he rejoined the track from a mistake at the Omega corner. Left him with the pit lane time Brno, which of course he then rode through injured, essentially turned into Brno to serve the penalty, if nothing else. Take those two out of the equation. Barcelona, for the sake, is really the only Grand Prix, or it is the only Grand Prix, since Qatar that he's been outside of the top 5 at the checkered flag. Of course, those 2 races, pre-summer break and the Catalan Grand Prix. Other than that, he has been a permanent top 5 finisher since the start of the European season, all the way back in April. He kind of snuck up on us in this Moto2 season, but the further back you look, signs were there.
Yeah, exactly. And we do this for a living and we can pick up on it, which says quite a lot about our instincts.
Because even coming into the summer break, he was 3rd favourite, 4th favourite for the World Championship. Certainly Gonzalez and Canet were considered ahead of him, potentially even 6 and 2.
I was still thinking Canet would come good in the flyaway stage of the season. That never quite came to pass. And if you speak to Diogo Moreira's manager, Diego Silvente, he would point out to the fact that in Argentina, I think he had an issue with something that was out of his control, quite potentially his tyre. So look at Austin when he was 21st, that was obviously a weather afflicted weekend. Started on slicks on a wet track, did not go to plan at all, finished 21st. So take those two out of the equation, and you're essentially looking at a rider that has top 5 potential every single race this year, which, again, really quite impressive consistency. We saw that pre-season as well. Where was he in the two tests? 4th and 5th. So the writing was on the wall right from the start, but I have to say, I felt that we would see podiums, we would see the occasional win from him, we would maybe see a challenge for the top 4 or 5 positions in the championship, but the vehicle has far exceeded my expectations for this year, and the performance in Portimao, as I said previously, that was the champion's ride, it really was. He dealt with the nerves, dealt with the pressure all weekend long, faced adversity at certain points and overcame it with minimum fuss. Speaking to him afterwards, he always just comes across so calm. He doesn't give the impression that there are many super highs with him or many super lows. Everything's taken with a very measured kind of outlook. And we know that that is something you need in a race, especially over 22 rounds, when you'll inevitably be faced with really tricky weekends and difficult situations. It's also quite interesting hearing Colin Bayer on the matter. He was talking to some of our Dutch colleagues in Dutch after he had done his English debrief, and Colin was saying from what he could see, Neil was riding during pre-season. He felt he was ready to step up to MotoGP at that point. He felt that he had already completely understood how to ride a Moto2 bike at that early stage of the season. And he said when it comes to handling pressure, you compare him with Manny Gonzalez, he's only been one winner this year, and that's coming from another Grand Prix winner and a Moto2 podium finisher. So Colin Bayer, very much Gil Carrera fan club.
We've got one more test to try and clear this weekend, one more hurdle to try and jump over to the Grand Moto2 World Championship. And that's the finish of the top 14 this weekend. On the basis, of course, that Manny Gonzalez wins on Sunday, which he has to do first. If Manny Gonzalez doesn't achieve that, then Joe Moreira is world champion, whether he finishes first or whether he finishes last. In the final round of the season, that's your new schedule for MotoGP. From there, free practice 1 session, which gets underway at 10 past 11. So hot on the heels of this typically restarted Moto2 FP1 session, which gets underway in 3 seconds' time. We like to give you a little bit of a peek behind the scenes here in the commentary box in Moto2. Our thanks to Elliot York, who of course is going to be joining us from pit lane tomorrow for Moto2 and Moto3 qualifying. You more hot footing if you'll get the pit lane overline kit to give us some help during the red flag, only for them to immediately announce when we're restarting. So Elliot has been stood down, but we thank him for at least trying to race to our assistance. But the session is now underway. We now talk about some actual action on the racetrack. Yes, the riders will be approaching turn 6 on this outlap with a little bit of trepidation.
I would say they certainly will. The exploratory laps, I would say, around turn 6 before they really get on some fast lap times. Danny Munoz is the first of those. You can see it quite easy as he comes in towards the apex. Then full gas once he's past that. It'll be interesting this weekend to see some lap times. Lewis, one that we're now obviously in our second season with Pirelli. We didn't come here in the first season with Pirelli last year, 2024. So having a net outright circuit record of a 133.3, I think is going to be demolished this weekend if, experience the previous tracks that we've visited this year and last or anything to go by. It did not take long to assert themselves as the fastest power supplier that we've had in this Moto2 category since they came in. So you'd be surprised to see these riders maybe down to 32s at some point this weekend, maybe 31s, dare I say it.
You could see riders from the outside shot there, just capturing the very inside of the circuit, a little bit of space there on the way through turn 6, so they're clearly aware of something that needs to be monitored. That's unfortunately Sasaki 71 RW Kelas that won't be ridden, it would appear, for certainly the initial restart of this session. Saki, of course, having his own accident, which we haven't seen Pete White at this crash, but Saki really crashed into the same zone. And I guess one would immediately think, has he even Saki crashed into the yellow flags? But I guess given the mitigating circumstances with the stoppage of the session, I think Saki will be okay with that one.
Yes, he may have to go and explain his case and give race direction the FIA stewards a bit of an understanding of what happened from his point of view. But yeah, let's see what happens if on the some water down into the number 6. That might go some way to explaining what happened with Hugo. So first of all, good that he's okay, and secondly, we are sending our thoughts to Andrew Huerta, still no update on the Spanish condition. It would be a shame if he was unable to end his season with some racing action. We have seen some real signs from Huerta in the last part of this year that he started to get the hang of Moto2. And really excited to see what he can do next year. He has number 22 on our screen there. That's a name that will be familiar to regular watchers of Moto2, provided to ride in this category full time. Hector Garzo was a couple of years he was riding for Cito Ponce's Moto2 team. Regular over in Moto E as well, champion last year. Real injury hit in 2025. But a bit of light relief here at the end of the year on that NTF chassis.
And of course his weekend to end all weekends in Moto2, which is his 37th Moto2 Stars weekend, did come here back in 2020. You might all recall Hector Garzo qualifying and finishing a very close second behind Jorge Martin in the Valencia Grand Prix 5 years ago. I guess if he could pick a circuit to make a wildcard appearance once again in Moto2, this would be the one. Saw how dirty offline it was when Garzo went wide and coming through turn 11, where the long lap penalty is situated around this circuit. So track still needing a little bit of cleaning up in this early stage of the weekend. Jake Dixon.
Screenshot of that timing car on your left, where we've got 6 spots of girl free. Inside the top 7, but as you said, exploratory laps at this point.
No Calix in the top 7 at the moment. Thiago Moreira, the championship leader, is in 8th. We've got Oscuro's first and fourth until Munoz just went second, and then we had the forward of Jorge Navarro. Of course, Ho's favourite here, the Valencia boy on the number 9, is now in 6th place. So, those yellows down at turn 6, they are. So, one rider hasn't heeded the warnings we've already had so far this morning, and it's Ifan Guevara for the second time, who's now crawling away on his hands and knees. He's crashed twice in essentially 4 laps at turn 6.
Good speed. Back up.
third place. Alonso's just behind.
Always within the same tenth of a second in a race situation, you can kind of, well, because of the nature of the big battles that you have in Moto3, sometimes the lap times fluctuate from 1 to sometimes 2 seconds from the fastest that you're able to do. You have to put your mind into that area where you have to be within a tenth of a second of your fastest lap every single time around. That is really something that's quite difficult to do. David was really very complimentary of Colin Bayer's riding throughout the Portuguese Grand Prix and Gil Moreira, who were just up ahead of him. The fact that they were so consistent. David was, when he was, where was he, 20th on the grid, 20th. Where he's just consistently there. It's not a surprise to see David Alonso up there at the front anymore. And it does bode well, I feel, for 2025. I would be absolutely amazed, absolutely shocked if he hasn't already had some very, very serious conversations with MotoGP factories with the view to 2027. I mean, if you're the likes of Honda or KTM, stupid really if you're not already putting the feelers out there to say, what do you think about our potential plans in 2027? Here's what we could offer you. It makes total sense, looking at this rider's trajectory and how he's developed throughout this year. And I'm not making any big predictions, but he's the favourite going into 2026.
I was about to say that. I'm equally surprised if some bookmakers aren't already installing David Alonso as title favourite for next season. We'll have a chance in this afternoon session when we review 2025. We'll also have a little look ahead to 2026, but so much to be excited about in this Moto2 class for next season. So many of these big hitters sticking around. Of course, we are losing to Moto2 some real assets to this Moto2 class. Of course, moving up to MotoGP for next season is Diogo Moreira. Of course, we're also losing Dixon to the World Superbike Championship for next season. Alvaro Reina, he moves to World Super Sport for next season too. But the vast majority of the heavyweights of Moto2 this season are staying where they are. And of course, when you add into the mix for Moto2 next season, the Moto3 World Champion Jose Antonio Rueda, the rider who's currently on course to finish runner-up to him, although that's not confirmed, Angel Sequeira, who joins Ivan Artola at the MSI squad. Netta moving up to Moto2 next season with the Speed RS team. Tayo Rosato coming up to Moto2 as well next year with Honda Team Asia. So often the case. So soon do we wave goodbye to some experienced Moto2 campaigners, but another exciting crop of rookies are moving up to take their place.
Yes, I think it should be another exceptional year next year when you think of the performances of Danny Holgado, the fact that Manu Gonzalez is going to be sticking around for another year. Barry Baltus as well, should be stronger. 2026, Aaron Net will be with a different team. We'll have Dennis Onju back as well. Of course, he'll be riding with Mark BDS. Yeah, I mean, all of those names that I've mentioned, you would imagine will be up there. Then it ages potentially being another year of experience under his belt.
We have potentially the name of Colin Bayer to that as well, having taken his first podium last time out in Portsmouth, touching on his impressive weekend where he really did explode onto our attention with his front row qualifying, taking third on the grid in Portsmouth, the fastest lap of the Grand Prix in the race, and finishing a very close second to Diogo Moreira. It's fair to say that through his rookie season, which started in similar fashion to Alonso's, it's fair to say, in terms of the results that Vaya was achieving at the start of the season, he's just been gradually putting the building blocks in place, hasn't he, through this season, of course, managed by the ultra-experienced IO squad, even if this is Nicky's first year at the helm, fully at the helm of that Moto2 squad, and just very maturely gone about his rookie season, even with, as he pointed out after the Grand Prix last Sunday, some off-track turbulence that he's had to deal with.
Yeah, that's a good shot. Lewis, Colin might have one or two harsh words for me for overlooking him for a potential spot championship fight next year, but yeah, it's been a far from straightforward year, hasn't it? Some personal tragedies, losing one of his cousins back before the season started in a recent accident, which was absolutely devastating for the family. And he said there was another bereavement as well in the family, leading up to Portugal as well, which was something they had to deal with. Obviously the situation with Jose Antonio Rueda and that awful crash that we saw with Noah Detweiler back in the deciding lap for the Moto3 race in Malaysia. Thankfully both riders on a decent road to recovery currently, and miraculously so after those horrible images that we saw back in Sepang. And, you know, Colin is really good friends with Jose Antonio Rueda. I think it's a really tightly knit team in IO. So to see all that, I think, was really quite difficult for him. Add in the fact that his adaptation to Moto2 was very difficult. Then he had a big injury, training injury, about a third of the way through the season. And speaking to him after the race in Portugal, he said that was actually one of the best things that could have happened to him to have that injury, because before that he got into such a negative mindset, and just really was quite glum, quite down. Wasn't anywhere near as quick as he thought he should be. He scored just 5 points prior to staying in that injury, and yeah, had a good chance to evaluate things over the summer break. And since the summer break, Colin has been a proper Moto2 rider, you could say. Came back in Austria, scored a top 10 finish, and from there, been a regular inside the top 10. A couple of front row appearances as well, one in Barcelona, one in Portugal. The kind of confidence with which he led the race in Portugal was so impressive. And I have to say, Lewis, he was sleeping on us throughout the weekend. At no point on Friday when I was looking through the fastest time was I thinking Colin Blair is going to be fighting for a podium here this weekend.
Yeah, but given that you say that he was the one dictating the pace and so much of the race, dictating a very fast pace too at the front of the race, you can't say enough good things about that performance from Vaya. It's also worth pointing out that physically he wasn't exactly operating at 100% in those last stages either.
Yeah, exactly. I caught up with his dad, Jürgen, yesterday, and he was saying that he had told Colin, just remember, the only reason you lost that race is because your arm, because he still doesn't have full strength in his arm, and I think he got very tired towards the end of that race in Portugal. And yeah, his dad most certainly felt that was the reason why he wasn't able to respond or even to keep Diogo Moreira behind him. So certainly very positive. And it's also detailing their extensive fitness training regimen that he is going to be undergoing throughout the winter months. Really no stone will be left unturned for the Bayer family as they prepare for their second Moto2 season. And I mean, we know that these guys are seriously tough, but Colin was telling us that when he made his return in Mugello from that arm injury, he said his strength was so low, and he'd obviously taken a bit of a hit to his fitness because he wasn't able to train with the kind of same intensity while he was recovering. He said he was almost spewing up in his helmet during that Mugello race weekend. Such was the kind of physical demands on his body. Really quite difficult to get back into the saddle of a Moto2 bike, and it did take him some rounds after Mugello to get back up to speed. And quite a tricky run as he was coming to terms with that in Bayer. 20th, 14th, 16th and 16th were his results just before the summer break, but as I previously said, that 3-week period where he was able to recover his fitness and recover his strength and to understand a few things he needed to work on the bike, really did help him out. So great to see Colin up there. We obviously knew from his Moto3 days that he is a massive talent and a real animal when it comes to work ethic and the kind of training that he puts in. He's a really intelligent young man. Yeah, as you said, it's not just Alonso and Holgado, the rookies this year, that we have to watch out for next year. I think Zaire is a very good shot as well.
And here's another who will hope to be in that conversation too. Perhaps hasn't had the same limelight in rookie season as Ivan Ortola. Although there have been one or two highlights. He got points actually in 10 of the last 11 Grand Prix as Ivan on the Boscoscuro. Although, fortunately for him, the vast majority of those have been 11th to 15th, only 4 top 10s in that time. Front row qualifier in Assen earlier in the season was Ortola in a couple of top 6 finishes. One in the wet, one in the dry, Austin and Austria, respectively. The best we've seen from Ortola so far this season. I guess we'll be looking rather enviously at the other rookies who all had Calix machinery to enjoy this season, whereas Ortola has been trying to find a good fight on board that MSI Boscoscuro, whereas there's been a bit of a revolving door on the other side of the MSI box. Certainly wouldn't expect that to be the case next season when he's going to have a very talented young teammate in the form of Ancon Keras. As MSI was to fight back last year's champions, of course, in this class. Going much tougher second time around.
Yeah, it's been a real tough season, hasn't it, for that team, not just results, but also the number of cases on the other side of the box. Garcia was a bit. Other riders have we had? We've had Eric Fernandez.
Gutierrez was there briefly in the season. Unai Radre. We've seen Harrison Boyce on that bike very recently as well. So yeah, you're on for 4 or 5 riders at the very least who've been on that second Boscoscuro through the season.
That was the side of the garage that won the championship last year. I mean, it's been quite a crazy reversal of fortunes in that side of the box. We know that crew chief Norman Rank, he'll be departing that team at the end of this season and coming across to take over from, it's on your screen, inside of the garage in Mark BDS. Martin Net will be filling in there next year. There is Richard Castro, who in turn will then be moving across to American Racing for next year to work with Joe Roberts for a second time.
Yeah, while Dixon was on screen there, it is worth, I guess, reflecting on Jake as his Moto2 career, which comes to an end this weekend. This is his 124th Moto2 outing this weekend, 126th Grand Prix. You might recall he did a couple of MotoGP substitute appearances back in 2021. 27 Grand Prix victories for Dixon, which he could still have another tomorrow. If he does win tomorrow's Moto2 Grand Prix, then he would move into the equal top 10 of Moto2 victories. He would equal the likes of Andrea Iannone, Frankie Morbidelli, Pecco Bagnaia and Alex Marquez, who of course the latter 3 of those are all champions in this class. And Brad Binder, Ralph Fernandez, Fermin Aldeguer and Chelsea Novietti, all with 8 career wins in Moto2. Dixon currently on 7. He's also got 22 podiums to his name. One more tomorrow would see him tie Paul Espargaro and Alex Marquez, 2 former champions, and I know from seeing that Dixon is aware of those stats and does quite like the idea of being able to equal some former Moto2 champions in this class. Look at his championship results over the course of the last 4 seasons: 6th, 4th, 8th, and currently 5th, with the potential to make that 3rd over the course of the season. A consistent, genuine front runner in his Moto2 class over several seasons. Never quite been able to translate that into a genuine title push into the last stages of the season, but he's a rider on and particularly off track who will be mixed in Moto2.
Yeah, without question. He is good value both on track and off it, is Jake. As you said, he never quite put a full championship challenge together, but he's been on the cusp of several title fights back in 2023. Even last year at certain points we were thinking mid-season push and Dixon could well come in and steal the championship, and then of course this year as well. He's always been kind of there in the background, never quite properly in the commanding position. As you see him going on into the 33.6s, which is impressive lap time, just 3/10 off the lap record now. And I think you look back to Dixon's career, we know that it is such a massive step coming across from a national superbike championship into the bare 58 I think what's impressive most about Dixon is that probably at the end of the first 3 years, his first 3 seasons in this category in 2019, when he had a really difficult rookie season aboard KTM chassis, which just wasn't competitive. The next year, when he had a very serious injury, here at this track, broken his wrist, which was career Christmas. And then the following year, he made his comeback and actually still, after effectively still lingering for 2021, and he didn't really have a great comeback season. The enemies of those teams, I think, would have been so easy for him to have walked away from Moto2 and thought, you know what, I can be competitive again at the front of PSP potentially, or even go across the world superbike. We know that Jake has wanted to be on bigger machinery. He feels that bigger machinery is more suited to his riding style and his riding capabilities. It would be so easy to walk away from this category and think, you know what, I didn't quite work hard, let's try something new, but he really did stick at it and just gradually became a better rider. I'm not just saying this because he's still a part of the world today, but I really genuinely believe that had he been on the Kelas this year, I think Jake would have been at the peak in the fight for the championship this year. I think kind of riding that we've seen more or less consistent level with one or two exceptions. I think on the Kelas he would have been, fighting for victories and wins.
Victories in Argentina and in Malaysia, both absolutely exceptional, where he looked certainly in pure dry conditions, the class of the field throughout that weekend. To be fair, he didn't look far off in Austin either, and might well have won that race even had it stayed dry. We never got the opportunity to find out because it rained moments before the race. And of course, it is worth saying that we might not have seen the last of him in this paddock, because he's first in line to take over if any Honda MotoGP riders next season are absent for injury as their lead world superbike contender for next season. So we may not have seen the last of him in this paddock yet.
That was the key part of his contract as he signed for Honda. It wasn't quite the deputy substitute rider. Takaki Gami and Alex Spargo have had their fill of MotoGP racing. Don't quite have that fire in the belly anymore. So not that you want riders to get injured obviously, but you will be appearing as such on the MotoGP next year. Interesting that we have Moreira circulating with Manu Gonzalez behind him. Both of those riders set personal best lap times recently to go second and third in this section. I think they were maybe just set up, realised that Manu was behind him. Sorry, it was Marcus Ramirez behind. They got confused with the blue N24 and the blue number 10, both yellow on their bikes.
Both heading up Spanish news for next season. Not had confirmation I'm aware of yet of Marcus Ramirez, but there are reports that he might be heading forward next season. Here are the two title contenders then together on track, and both going very, very quickly, both threatening Dixon and potentially the lap record. A 33.3 for Moreira, a 33.189 for Manu Gonzalez. That is a new all-time lap record. Your two title contenders now 1 and 2.
Yeah, it would be great to see proper all-time fight, wouldn't it? To bring the season to an end.
Well, is that a fight that Diogo Moreira will want to take on Sunday?
Exactly. I do feel it is quite unlikely to wish that going into the final race, because we know that Diogo is a pretty intelligent guy, and he'll know there's absolutely no point getting caught up in something like that at the final race. But hey, it's good to see Manu Gonzalez looking like his old self in the year in SC1. It has been some time since we've seen him put proper performance in where everyone else will be taking note in this Moto2 category. Well, Tony Arbolino up there in fourth position, looking on to sign off from the Pramac team in a good way. Although, actually, some of them are running the team. Tony Arbolino is very good at one kind of gets stranded, not really able to make further progress from that point.
Yeah, we haven't seen him higher than 10th now in the last 4 Grand Prix. In Motegi, I think there's possibly more to that really, more than that, had he not had his physical issues late in the race. Gonzalez now leads Moreira around the circuit. I think it's one of Manu Gonzalez's favourite hobbies in Moto2, showing Diogo Moreira the way around the circuit in practice sessions. I think it has Gonzalez at times that Diogo likes to follow at various stages in a weekend. Gonzalez with another low 133. The Sabtu Authority. You could see Sergio Garcia going up into second place. We know he's a bit of a circuit specialist. Bit of is actually not doing Sergio Garcia justice. If you go through his Moto3 career, 5 podiums around this circuit, including that maiden win back in 2019. He he is a Valencia boy, and of course will be a regular on this grid next season. So perhaps we shouldn't be too surprised based on his pedigree around the circuit, but certainly surprised based on his recent Moto2 history.
Absolutely. It's a very good shot indeed. And Sergio Garcia, one of those little valley Moto Mini that we saw yesterday during the Grand Finale 2025. He will still be fairly competitive here. Seems like no matter what conditions he was in or what machine he was on, he was always fighting in front of Moto3 at this circuit. Yeah, you can see a bit of a reminder of Sergio Garcia's talents. Those have been far few infrequent throughout this year. Sometimes great as well. To jump up into second, the number 11.
Well, runners set the season he's having at the moment. Back-to-back points finishes, 8th in Malaysia, followed by a 12th in Portimao. He's been in Q2 in each of the last 2 Grand Prix, and yeah, he's one of those riders that perhaps doesn't get the press that he ought to, given the machinery that he's on, but one or two are noticing Alex Stringe's performances in the latter part of this season.
Yes, in a former guide, that forward factory, Cliff forward factory, was MD Augusta back, and they had a pole position here, didn't they, 1 year, which was not the one, of course,
not that he started from it again.
Exactly, yeah. But that, let's say that team with the original, so the previous version of that chassis at least showed some speed around this Valencia track.
Of course, at the moment, potentially get himself into the 132s in this session, taking the lap record away from Manu Gonzalez. Here's Danny Holgado, was officially confirmed in Portimao last weekend as the Rookie of the Year in Moto2, and will finish 6th in the World Championship. Can't be caught by David Alonso behind him, nor can he catch Jay Dixon up ahead of him. And 6th place at the end of the season for Holgado represents an outstanding job well done. Not that we expected anything poor from him this season, but I don't think we expected the kind of heights we've seen from him in 2025. He'll be another rider thinking I'm a genuine title contender for next season, but here comes a Stridge who's about to set the lap record. It is a 1:33.050, and we haven't said this many times, right foot forward down there at forward, the forward chassis, the fastest thing around Valencia right now.
Yeah, and Alex Stridge, the fastest Moto2 rider around this circuit as it stands, and a really impressive lap time, that 3/10 under Aaron Canett's previous lap record. Would you say that Moto2 lap record will in absolute fashion this weekend? So we find the season time for 32s in qualifying tomorrow, maybe even in the 31. With similar stuff on the grid in this early stage, showing some real pedigree.
This was the line, what could a good jockey doing? Teammate Jorge Navarro, who also knows the circuit like the back of his hand, is down in 25th at the moment, 1.9 seconds off the pace. He's now there all session.
Yeah, and Navarro, as we know, a multiple podium finisher in this Moto2 category. Jorge Navarro, 11th podiums in this category, in fact, so
including here back in 2019 when he started from pole position. The yellow flags come out and turn 8 this time. It's sort of Salat who's responsible for that as he trudges away with a shake of the head. But you want to give the chance to just leave that box Scuro there and fast forward to next season with American Racing. You might well take it.
That's turn 6, no? I don't think
that is turn 6.
Yeah.
We've got some water in the work with our crash graphics because we incorrectly identified Guevara's crashing in 6 earlier on when he crashed at 4, and that is turn 6 for Philip Salat. Although, given how many riders have been through there in this session, I don't think we can put that one down to the circuit.
You see that Jake Dixon coming out of turn 6, running off the line, how dirty the track is on the run up to turn 7 there. So it does seem as though the track, I mean, it's obviously the lap records at the moment, but pretty careful, I feel, to get off the race line, so there's still quite a bit of dust and dirt down.
So actually 16th at the moment in this session, of which there are just under 4 minutes remaining. Reminder, if you're just tuning in, we've had a half-hour or so delay to proceedings this morning due to some diminished grip down at turn 6, which caused 3 crashes at the start of this Moto2 FP1 session. Nissan Guevara, Adrian Huertas and Yuri Sasaki. Guevara got away injury-free from that one, but then crashed again at turn 4 once the session restarted. Huertas was stretched away, although we didn't see him moving. No further update on his condition yet, but we do wish him well. Now in crash for Salat down there at turn 6. David Alonso moves himself up from 18th. He climbs up into the top 10. A top 10 at the moment, which is covered by less than half a second.
At the top here, David Alonso, into the mix. We know that he gets stronger chance to progress. It's an understanding of the track and what it means on the Moto2 machine. I was surprised to see him down in 12th as it stands. It was absolutely adamant he was carrying the fight for the championship down into this round, but now he can just focus on going out there and winning. As we have right here up behind, yes, he's going to get both by the Italian. He is absolutely not the best bit of riding from Selesai. Yes, he seems to be unaware that Kelas was behind him. So Kelas, I think, as long as his right to protect there, he needs to be a little more, I think, aware of just who and where on the track.
Not quite as awake as he ought to be. It's just a minute shy of 11 o'clock in the morning here in Valencia. Vietti, another rider who I think will be quite keen to see the back of this season, certainly the way his season has been trending in the final few rounds of the season. Vietti 8th in the World Championship, as mentioned. If Arenas and Senaradius score heavily this weekend, he could drop down to 10th in the World Championship. And one of my, I didn't even think I was going out on a limb by tipping Chelsea Vietti to potentially win the World Championship this season, given how strong the Scorer was last year and how good we know Vietti is. Once again, I guess, a Moto2 season where at times Vietti has flattered to deceive.
Yeah, sure. It's certainly been an eventful couple of laps for Aaron at that moment. And turn number 6.
We're not sure now, are we? We're questioning ourselves here in the commentary box as we see those graphics pop up. We can at least narrow it down to one of the 9 left-handers who runs the Valencia circuit. We'll figure out the rest from there, but Kelas did stay out on track, stayed up through his left knee, and he'll be visiting Simon Crowfar essentially at the end of this session. That instant holding Kelas to Vietti. Vietti who's going to be launching the case of the defence in that one. So they nearly came together at what we can confirm for you with certainty was turn 11 on the previous lap. It does look though, with 45 minutes of this session remaining, that Alex Scridge for Forward is going to top this one. Get the press release written already, they'll be saying down there at Forward Racing. As Forward smashed the lap record this morning in the Ricardo Tormo circuit of Valencia. Real pride-ish names up at the top. Scridge quickest, Munoz third. The circuit that, maybe not last year of course, but in previous years has held Junior GP and European Championship Moto2 rounds. So the likes of Scridge and Munoz, and of course Garcia from his Moto3 days will know the circuit very, very well. They're all in the top 4 right now.
Yeah, Garcia has finished 13th this year. It's not exactly like we've been used to seeing him towards the sharp end in 2025. Also improving yet again, so solidifying his 10th position. Yeah, that's great. It's going to be the first time that he's ever led a Moto2 session on the field. It probably is.
Can't think of one. Certainly would be the first time in the dry that we've seen a Scridge do this. So the forward chassis too. Can't go any further forwards than there at the moment. The only way is backwards for them now, having topped SP1, but wouldn't be at all surprised if a Scridge can keep up this sort of performance through the weekend. As mentioned, we've already seen Alex Scridge through this season. Qualified 4th back in Argentina via Q1 and finished 7th. And he then finished 8th from a top 10 qualifying in Malaysia. Jay Dixon is not going to deny him on his final lap of the session. He stays in 7th place. The 2 title contenders, if you're wondering, you can't read the left-hand side of your screen. 2nd and 5th. Gonzalez ahead of Moreira in free practice 1.
Significantly in that final sector, about 2 tenths of a second on the last couple of laps that he did. Haven't had really trying to turn the bike, get it turned into turn 14. And the barrel and then on. So the bike is one side of the forward racing box and a bit of anchorage on the other. The barrel will end it on a 25th position when his kick is up there in first. And unfortunately, it's been a pretty wretched season, hasn't it, for the number 9, and that is practically
we can confirm with certainty that one is turn 6, so we got it right in the end. Jorge Navarro now looks down at turn 6, he'll see his rather exalted and pleased teammate Alex Scridge with a new all-time lap record, who's waving to what is quite a healthy crowd already on this Friday morning. This is one of the beauties of this circuit, the bowl stadium atmosphere we have. It is a sellout on Sunday here at the Ricardo Tormo circuit. They can start the MotoGP action, of course, since 2023. It is Alex Escridge, though, who tops pre-practice 1 and early Friday morning surprise in Moto2, with title chaser Manu Gonzalez second, Danny Munoz third for the IO squad ahead of Sergio Garcia, back on form for Agustin. Diogo Moreira, the championship leader, 5th from Danny Holgado, Jake Dixon from Albert Arenas, Alonso Lopez and David Alonso completing the top 10. Barry Baltus 11th ahead of Tony Arbolino, Aaron Kinnett and podium finisher for Portimao Colin Fire, Federacian, Chelsea Gobietti, Ivan Altola and Philip Salach. Next up, Salach joins the Turn 6 club later on. Marcos Ramirez was 19th ahead of Anchi Fernandez, Van den Gorberg and Zunatusa, Cooney 24th ahead of Navarro, who crashed at the end of the session, Hector Garza on the NCS, Ethan Guevara, who crashed twice in the first 5 minutes either side of that red flag stoppage, Hidemi Sasaki another early faller, as was Adrian Huertas. We hope to have news on him in practice this afternoon. But it was Alex Escridge who set the fastest ever Moto2 lap of Valencia this morning as forwards, showing the way forwards in FP1. MotoGP is on the way in just a moment.
MotoGP's longest season history has reached its final chapter as it curves comes down the record-breaking 2025 the Ricardo Tormo circuit in Valencia. One of the most beautiful cities in Mediterranean Spain, Valencia blends old town charm and futuristic architecture and first on the calendar back in 1999. The final showdown gets underway with FP1 next live. Time for MotoGP.